Welcome to xCrimes.
And before we get started on today's deep dive, we want to invite you to subscribe to the xCrimes YouTube channel.
That's right. If you're listening to this on an audio-only platform, you should know that the YouTube version has so much more.
It really does. It includes video and real visual material. We're talking police footage, family photos, things that give you a truly comprehensive look at these stories. All other platforms, including this one, are audio only.
Today, we are attempting to unravel one of the most astonishing and, frankly, tragic stories to come out of Brazil in a long time.
It's the story of the spectacular rise and the absolutely catastrophic collapse of a woman named Flordelis dos Santos de Souza.
And this story, it really goes so much further than a simple crime. I mean, Flordelis achieved not just fame in Brazil, but global recognition.
Yeah, and it was all built on this meticulously crafted life story. Her public identity was, the ultimate tale of redemption, the girl from the slums, the favelas of Rio, who becomes this religious and political superstar.
A superstar with so many different pillars of power. She was a famous gospel singer. Her music was everywhere.
And a powerful pastor, too. She didn't just have one church. She oversaw a whole network of 9 mega churches.
And then, on top of all that, she rises to become a federal congresswoman, a major political player representing the state of Rio de Janeiro.
But the title that really defined her, the one that cemented her image with the public, was the Mother of the Nation.
And that was based entirely on her claim, which she repeated constantly, of adopting, or at least housing, a staggering 55 children.
Right, most of whom she claimed to have rescued directly from the dangerous streets of the favelas.
It's an almost perfect public image, a religious saint, a political powerhouse, and this boundless mother figure.
Exactly, and that's where our deep dive begins today. Our mission is to pull back that carefully constructed facade.
We need to investigate how a woman who was hailed as a hero could implode her own empire, fueled by decades of scandal, corruption, and ultimately a brutal murder investigation.
We have to expose the raw power dynamics, the financial greed, and the profound manipulation that was going on just behind the velvet curtain of her ministry and her family.
So we have to start where it all fell apart, the moment the facade just shattered. The crime itself.
The timeline begins in the pre-dawn hours of June 16, 2019. It's cold, it's dark.
The victim is 42-year-old Anderson do Carmo de Souza. Now, he was Flordelis' much younger husband. He was her co-pastor, and this is critical, he was the financial manager of her entire operation.
The couple was returning to their home in Niterói, which is a pretty affluent area just outside Rio. It's around 4 hours in the morning.
Flordelis would later describe this as just a normal late-night stroll, a quiet end to their evening.
So Flordelis, who was 58 at the time, she claims she went straight inside the house. So she's going to check on the children, go to bed.
Right. And Anderson, he supposedly stayed behind in the car for just a minute. He was just going to check a few emails on his phone.
And then the silence of the neighborhood is it's obliterated.
Neighbors reported hearing this rapid percussive sound, just continuous gunfire.
Anderson do Carmo was found slumped in the driver's seat. He had been shot over 30 times.
2 of their sons rushed him to the hospital, but it was far too late. He was declared dead on arrival.
And the sheer number of shots, that volume, plus the precision of the wounds, it immediately told investigators this was not a random robbery.
No, not at all. This was a targeted execution-style murder.
So the immediate challenge for the police was just staggering. They had to look past this massive celebrity image,
Yeah.
the grieving wife, the powerful congresswoman.
And somehow sift through the dynamics of the 56 people living in that one house. I mean, can you imagine? Who was loyal to whom? Who really held the power?
To really understand how the House of Flordelis collapsed, we absolutely have to rewind. We have to go back to her origins, because this story of darkness, it began decades earlier.
Flordelis dos Santos de Souza was born in 1961, and she was born in the Chacarizu favela of Rio de Janeiro.
For anyone who isn't familiar with the context in Brazil, a favela isn't just a poor neighborhood. It's a very specific, marginalized kind of urban settlement.
And that context is so important here. Favelas are defined by extreme poverty, makeshift homes built on top of each other, and a chronic lack of basic infrastructure. We're talking sanitation, safe drinking water, things we take for granted.
They're also defined by volatility. They're often headquarters for organized crime, and they face these violent police crackdowns.
Yeah.
But at the same time, they foster this intense sense of community.
A mandatory sense of community, really, because survival literally depends on it.
And Flordelis' early family life was steeped in this. Her father, Francisco dos Santos, he was an artist and a musician. Her mother, Carmesina Moura dos Santos, who people called Carmesina, ran a small daycare out of their home, just trying to make ends meet.
As crime got worse in the 60s, the family did something a lot of people were doing. They converted to the Pentecostal faith. They joined the Assembly of God.
And this shift, it wasn't just religious, it was a socioeconomic choice.
Right. The Pentecostal movement, especially in Brazil, is a very charismatic form of Christianity. It's all about direct experiential faith miracles, divine healing, speaking in tongues.
Oh, mambre de protoston prefrepevi, sum proton poronungan singing, and soon contado the prefrepevi, bebe petuchus no prefrepevi.
And in a place like a favela, which is defined by suffering and instability, that message of immediate divine intervention offers this powerful alternative. It gives meaning where political and social systems have failed.
So Flordelis grew up completely immersed in this environment, watching these services where emotional intensity and the promise of the supernatural were everything.
But the seeds of her later manipulation, they were sown much, much earlier. And they're rooted in the shocking history of her own mother, Carmesina.
This is where we see this generational pattern of spiritual authority being used not for faith, but for raw power and survival.
What's so disturbing here is the generational darkness that Flordelis inherited. I mean, Carmesina herself was a victim of horrifying abuse.
We know this for a fact. Documentation confirms she was forced into marriage at just 10 years old.
10. And was subjected to relentless sexual and physical violence. The narrative that cemented this trauma for her came from her own mother, who told her, "A man only beats his wife because he loves her."
So that established this deep-seated idea in the family that power, pain, and control were all just tangled together.
And later, Carmesina allegedly became a powerful figure herself, not just a pastor's wife, but a self-proclaimed witch and spiritual healer.
The sources claim she performed rituals for money, often exploiting sick and desperate people with promises of miraculous healing.
And if the person didn't get better, the blame was just neatly placed on their own lack of faith. Flordelis, as a child, watched all of this. She was internalizing the lesson that spiritual authority could be a very effective source of income and control.
This reputation for using, let's say, dark spiritual power was known in the community, and the rumors around Carmesina's family are, well, they're extreme.
They're deeply unsettling. And they really speak volumes about the reputation they were trying to cultivate. For instance, her older brother, Flordelis' uncle, was widely rumored to have dark powers.
The stories are shocking. The rumor was that he tortured his own teenage wife, locked her up, forced a miscarriage through violence, and it ultimately led to her death.
But the myth-making gets even more macabre. After this, Uncle was later found dead, dismembered, and, according to the rumor, completely drained of blood.
An extreme story started to circulate in the favela. The rumor was that Carmesina allegedly bathed in his blood to absorb his power.
And whether those specific, horrifying rumors are literally true is almost beside the point,
Right. The point is that these stories circulated. They defined her family's reputation, and they established this clear pattern, a line of powerful female figures who used spiritual authority, manipulation, and the threat of dark practices to achieve dominance and survive.
Flordelis learned early that power came from inspiring a mix of fear and the promise of impossible redemption.
And she definitely had the talent to build on that foundation. She was a gifted singer. She led worship services with a ton of charisma.
Her faith, which started as a family thing, was really cemented by a personal tragedy. At age 14, her father and brother died together in a car accident.
And she channeled that grief directly into her ministry, which elevated her status within the church.
But she didn't just stay in the church. Her early evangelism was radical. She took to the streets with this remarkable, maybe calculated confidence.
She would approach known criminals, notorious drug dealers, gang leaders in the most dangerous parts of the favela, and just start preaching to them.
And she was successful. She drew these hardened figures into her orbit, brought them into her church, and made them loyal disciples.
She used these exploits, like one story where she supposedly confronted armed men by threatening them with leprosy from God, to build this public image of herself as a kind of prophet, a woman protected by divine favor.
Her personal life, though, was still turbulent. In her early 20s, she got married and had 3 biological children, a daughter, Simone, and 2 sons, Flavio and Adriano.
But by age 30, that marriage was over. Flordelis claimed it was because of abuse, while her ex-husband said she cheated due to a sexual appetite.
Whatever the reason, she was now a single mother, relying heavily on her own mother, Carmesina.
And it's right at this moment, this tumultuous time, that she begins the practice that would define her entire career: the informal adoption of children from the favela.
She would just invite any child who was desperate or hungry to come live at her house. There was nothing formal or legal about it.
And crucially, this was her first real mechanism of control and manipulation. Testimony from those children suggests she convinced some of them to leave their own families by promising a life with fewer rules.
And she explicitly told them they didn't need their biological families anymore. She was systematically creating this deep emotional and physical dependency.
This dependency soon led to the most critical relationship of her life: Anderson do Carmo.
Anderson, a male, was only 14 years old when he first crossed paths with Flordelis in 1992. And here's the first major red flag in the family dynamic.
He was initially dating her biological daughter, Simone.
Exactly. Anderson quickly moved into the house as one of the adopted children, but the other kids noticed right away that he was Flordelis's favorite. He got special treatment, better food, more attention.
The controversy around the timeline of their relationship is just staggering. The allegation is that Flordelis, who was 30, started a sexual relationship with Anderson, who was 14, soon after he moved in.
She denied this vehemently, of course. She claimed their romance only began after he turned 18.
But whatever the exact timing, the undeniable fact is this: in 1998, Anderson, age 21, and Flordelis, age 37, got married.
And that locked in a 16-year age gap and set the stage for decades of this deeply intertwined financial and emotional control.
So with Anderson now her husband, co-parent, and soon-to-be manager, the family unit was set. And they were about to use a horrific national tragedy to launch Flordelis onto the international stage.
Her media breakthrough in 1994 was a masterclass in exploiting public tragedy. It came right after the horrific 1993 Candelaria massacre.
That was a moment of profound national shame for Brazil. It was when corrupt police officers brutally targeted and murdered street children who were sleeping outside the Candelaria church in downtown Rio. It shocked the entire world.
And Flordelis seized on this public grief and outrage. She transformed herself from a local preacher into a national savior.
Her publicized story, which she pushed relentlessly, was that in February 1994, 37 children, traumatized survivors fleeing the massacre, had just shown up on her doorstep.
The result was immediate. Her status was transformed overnight. She went from being a preacher in a favela to an international saintly sensation, a hero who was succeeding where the state had so miserably failed.
But scrutiny followed, and it followed quickly.
Reporters and local authorities noted the sheer impossibility of her story. I mean, she was living in a 2-bedroom apartment with dozens of children.
There's no way she could afford to feed them all. And disturbing details started coming out, like children being sent to scavenge in dumpsters behind restaurants for food. The image was already starting to crack.
On top of that, a judge recognized the severity of the situation and accused her of harboring underage children without any formal adoption papers.
Which legally is basically abduction and child trafficking.
So instead of cooperating, Flordelis did what she was best at. She spun the narrative and relied on fear. She went into hiding, gathered the kids, put them on a bus, and fled to another favela.
The local gang members there confronted her about being on their territory, and what did she do?
She used her incredible charisma. She told them her heroic, tragic story.
And the gang members were reportedly so moved by this narrative of a woman protecting children that they helped find her and her massive new family a permanent place to live.
She then emerged from hiding, held a triumphant press conference, and managed to successfully spin the whole legally dubious situation into a victory. She convinced the very officials who had opposed her to support her.
She eventually formalized some adoptions, but the final count reached 55 children, though only 13 were ever legally adopted.
The rest were just part of this highly controlled household, which provided her with this unassailable public image of selfless maternal devotion. The entire family was now a public brand.
And that success immediately translated into building a spiritual and financial empire.
2 local businessmen, inspired by her media story, donated a large, fully furnished house. Flordelis and Anderson turned the garage into their first new church.
And this is where we need to look at the financial structure. They funded themselves through tithing.
Right, the mandatory financial requirement in the Pentecostal faith. Members have to donate a percentage of their income, usually 10%, to the church to guarantee their salvation.
This system ensured a steady, guaranteed flow of income. And they expanded rapidly, eventually building the massive City of Fire Church in an abandoned bus depot.
It was an instant success. It attracted over 5,000 people every week. And they eventually expanded to operate 9 mega churches across the state.
The income was substantial. Sources say they were generating up to $20,000 a month from tithing, donations, and merchandise.
To put that in perspective, at the time, the average national wage in Brazil was about $500 a month. So they were accumulating incredible wealth, all thanks to the mandatory generosity of their often struggling followers.
And Flordelis expertly leveraged this platform into full-blown celebrity. She released successful gospel albums, establishing herself as a legitimate mainstream figure.
And that celebrity status was a powerful deflection tool. It made it really hard for critics to focus on the controversial origins of her family or her wealth.
Her fame really peaked in 2002. She appeared on the hugely popular TV talk show Planet Zucha.
And it was on that show that the host, the iconic celebrity Zucha, publicly gave her the title that would stick forever, the Mother of the Nation.
This exposure led to more opportunities. A biographical film in 2009, a major recording contract in 2010. By the mid-2010s, she was one of the most recognized women in Brazil.
With that kind of network and loyal following, the shift to politics was almost inevitable. After 2 failed local runs, she aimed for national power in 2018.
She ran for the Chamber of Deputies, which is like being a U.S. congressperson, a position with immense power and critically parliamentary immunity.
And she won in a landslide. Over 196,000 votes, making her the most voted woman in the state.
Her political branding was surgically precise. She campaigned on children's rights, adoption reform confronting crime. She perfectly embodied the ideal image for conservative voters: maternal, religious, and powerful.
Her political success was a sophisticated brand strategy. It was an extension of her church, which was a built-in voting base. And most importantly, that office gave her one final layer of protection:
Parliamentary immunity, which she would soon need desperately, because the success she had on the public stage was the complete opposite of the desperation and financial control she was battling at home.
The external brilliance of the Flordelis brand was masking this severe, potentially deadly internal conflict.
The marriage to Anderson, which had been the backbone of her entire rise, was collapsing under the weight of 2 things: money and control.
Behind closed doors, Anderson had become the sole manager of all finances. Church money, family money, her congressional salary. He controlled it all.
So Flordelis, now a famous singer and a congresswoman, was furious that she had to ask her younger husband for permission for every single purchase, especially the luxuries she felt she had earned.
The arrangement he'd set up was very restrictive. He kept 60% of their income for bills and household expenses. She got 40% as spending money.
And her resentment was simple. She believed she was the talent, she was the star bringing in the money, and she hated his absolute financial dominance.
But divorce was not an option.
Not at all. For a devout politician whose entire brand was built on the sanctity of family, a divorce would destroy her career, her churches, everything.
She needed Anderson gone, but his departure had to be tragic and sudden, not scandalous. And right there, you have a clear, undeniable motive for murder.
And that realization leads us to the grim fact that this was not a crime of passion. This was a long-plotted execution.
Starting a full year before Anderson's death, multiple Documented attempts were made on his life using poison.
The evidence is shocking. Anderson was hospitalized 6 different times in 2018 and 2019. And every single time, it happened right after he ate or drank something prepared at home.
He lost a dramatic amount of weight. Doctors couldn't figure out his recurring gastrointestinal issues, this internal burning he felt.
And testimony from inside the house confirms it was deliberate. An adopted daughter, Marzi Teixeira da Silva, was caught red-handed mixing white powder into Anderson's food.
And police searches later revealed that Simone dos Santos Rodriguez Flordelis' biological daughter and Anderson's ex-girlfriend had been searching online for how to buy cyanide.
Simone tried to say she was looking for euthanasia medicine for a friend's sick dog, a claim investigators just immediately dismissed as absurd.
But the most crucial testimony came from several of the children who later broke their silence. They confirmed Flordelis' direct involvement and her chilling intent.
They reported hearing her say, talking about Anderson, "He is going to die because he is in God's way."
So she was framing the murder not just as a financial necessity, but as a divine mandate.
And when the poison kept failing, testimony alleges Flordelis just pragmatically suggested they switch tactics. She said, if the poison doesn't work, we'll have to use bullets.
It's also suggested that she already had a replacement for Anderson lined up. She'd started a new love interest with another adopted son whom she was positioning to take Anderson's place.
It just shows that the adoptions were merely tools to fulfill her own emotional and professional needs.
And this internal exploitation, it went far beyond money and romance. It created this profoundly abusive and dysfunctional hierarchy in the house.
We have to acknowledge the allegations against the victim, Anderson. Many of the children accused him of being abusive and highly controlling.
And more disturbingly, several adopted daughters claimed he sexually abused them. A point that gains grim relevance when you remember he was shot multiple times in the groin area.
The children also testified that Flordelis organized the 55 kids into this exploiting hierarchy. There was the A team, her biological kids, and a few adopted favorites, and the B team, which was everyone else.
The A team got private rooms, regular meals, better clothes. The B team kids slept crowded on bunk beds, scavenged for food in dumpsters, or ate leftovers.
Flordelis used these children as social and political bodyguards to protect her public image, organizing them into this weaponized system.
And allegations surfaced of even more extreme purification rituals. Things like locking children in dark rooms for weeks with only raw vegetables and water.
And the darkest claims were that Flordelis performed sexual acts under the guise of spiritual cleansing, demanding compliance in exchange for status, or even just basic necessities.
It demonstrates this systemic use of spiritual power for sexual and psychological control over vulnerable children.
Which brings us back to the night of the shooting, June 16th, 2019. Flordelis provided this very specific but ultimately unbelievable account of what happened.
Right. She said she and Anderson were coming home around 4 a.m. from a late-night stroll.
And she told police that on the drive home, she noticed 2 angry motorbikers tailgating them aggressively, which suggests a robbery motive.
She claimed Anderson evaded them just before they got home. Then she goes inside. He stays in the car to check email.
And that's when she hears the gunshots. She said she only realized he was in trouble because he didn't immediately rush inside to check on her safety, like she said he always did.
In the immediate aftermath, she performed for the media. Overwhelming grief, all-night vigils, almost fainting at the funeral. The media initially framed it as a political attack.
But investigators weren't swayed. Their initial findings quickly exposed major gaping holes in her story.
Contradiction number 1. The police reviewed all the CCTV footage from cameras near the house. They found absolutely no evidence of any motorbikers following them.
So her entire suggested motive was invalidated, just like that.
Contradiction number 2. The family's 2 large guard dogs. Neighbors confirmed the dogs, who are notorious for barking at strangers, didn't make a sound before or during the gunshots.
Which strongly suggested the killer was familiar with the house, familiar with the dogs, known to the family.
And the key piece of evidence came from the home's own security cameras, even though they were angled away from the entrance.
CCTV captured Lucas Cesar dos Santos Souza, an 18-year-old adopted son, arriving by Uber just 15 minutes before the murder. He was carrying a black backpack.
And crucially, he's seen leaving shortly after the murder without the backpack. Police also noted Lucas had an outstanding warrant for drug dealing.
When police questioned Lucas, his story kept changing. First, he was dropping off laundry. Then he was hiding a drug stash.
But under pressure, he finally cracked. He admitted he'd gone to a nearby favela the week before to buy a weapon, but not for him.
It was a favor for Flavio dos Santos Rodriguez. Flordelis' biological son, and the gun, he said, was in that black backpack.
Lucas pointed the finger directly at Flavio as the shooter. This led police to immediately issue a warrant for Flavio's arrest.
He was arrested just 36 hours after the attack at Anderson's funeral, while Flordelis was publicly mourning for the cameras.
And the physical evidence sealed it. Police found the murder weapon hidden in a false ceiling in Flavio's room.
It had been wiped of prints, but they found definitive proof: a single pubic hair on the gun that belonged to Flavio.
In custody, Flavio initially confessed, claiming Anderson deserved it for sexually abusing his sisters. He later retracted that, claiming coercion.
But it didn't matter. Both Lucas, for sourcing the gun, and Flavio, for pulling the trigger, were immediately imprisoned.
But the investigators knew it didn't stop with the hitmen. They deepened their inquiry into the very foundation of the family's public image, scrutinizing the backgrounds of all 55 children.
And this is where they uncovered the complete, cynical fabrication of the mother of the nation narrative. They found out that Daniel, a son who grew up believing he was their biological child, was actually abducted as an infant.
The detail is horrifying. Flordelis and Anderson, who couldn't conceive together, made an agreement with an 18-year-old biological mother for an open adoption.
But instead, they just took the baby from the hospital, disappeared, and raised him as their own.
And this fact, uncovered during a murder investigation, proved they were willing to commit serious crimes, fraud, kidnapping, just to maintain their facade. It confirmed the entire household was built on lies.
As the investigation went on, the focus shifted from the men who pulled the trigger to the person who stood to benefit the most.
The police concluded this wasn't a spontaneous crime. It was a highly organized plot involving multiple family members, all acting on behalf of one central figure.
They mapped out the full scope of the conspiracy. They called it a criminal organization disguised as a devout family.
It included 2 biological children, Flavio the shooter, and Simone, who looked for cyanide, 4 adopted children, including Lucas and Marzi, a granddaughter, and even external associates.
And crucially, investigators figured out how Anderson had discovered the initial poisoning plots.
The perpetrators were coordinating via text message, and those messages were synced to a device that Anderson could access. He knew his life was in danger long before he was shot.
When the police finally searched Flordelis' phone, the case broke wide open. But there was that massive legal hurdle.
Parliamentary immunity. As a sitting federal congresswoman, she could not be arrested.
So the police spent over a year building an ironclad case and pushing Congress to strip her of that protection, arguing it was being used to shield a murder suspect.
During this legal fight, critical testimonies emerged from children who had broken free from her control, like an adopted son named Misael.
They testified that Flordelis was the intellectual mentor of the crime, and the motive was pure financial greed and her desire for total control.
And after the murder, her facade slipped entirely. Multiple children claimed that after Anderson's body was taken away, Flordelis shouted, "I am free."
But the key evidence, the undeniable proof, came from the text messages recovered from her phone.
These weren't subtle. They included an explicit offer of $2,000 to Lucas to kill Anderson, suggesting he stage it as a robbery so she wouldn't be implicated.
She also sent these desperate messages to another adopted son, Andre, begging him to help her end this, calling Anderson a scumbag and a bastard.
She wrote, "I'm begging you, Andre. How much longer do we have to put up with this scumbag in our lives? Help me to end this once and for all."
It proves she wasn't a victim of abuse lashing out, as she later claimed. She was the primary orchestrator.
Her defense was just a mess of contradictions. She denied sending the messages. Marzi claimed she stole the phone and sent them. Then Flordelis claimed she loved Anderson, but suggested the murder was the result of his alleged abuse.
The long legal struggle finally ended in August 2021. The Brazilian Congress voted overwhelmingly 437-7 to revoke her mandate and strip her of her immunity.
She was arrested 2 days later. And even in handcuffs, she went right back to her public persona, posting a video claiming, "I'm being arrested for something I did not do. Pray for me."
The veneer of the saintly mother was officially and irrevocably shattered.
She was tried for aggravated murder, attempted murder, forgery, and armed criminal association. The trial was long, complex, and filled with heartbreaking testimony pitting child against child.
In November 2022, the final verdict came down. Flordelis dos Santos de Souza, the former congresswoman, the mother of the nation, was convicted as the mastermind.
She was sentenced to 50 years and 28 days in prison for ordering the death of her husband.
Her main co-conspirators also received heavy sentences. Flavio, the shooter, got 33 years. Simone, her daughter, got 30 years for her role.
And Lucas, the adopted son who sourced the weapon, he got a lighter sentence of 7 years because he cooperated with the prosecution.
The court's sentencing statement really reflected the horror of the nation. It emphasized the hatred, cold-bloodedness, and disrespect for human life she showed by using her own children as pawns in a crime orchestrated for money and power.
It's just breathtaking to reflect on the contrast between her public image, this maternal figure rescuing 55 children, and the reality. A manipulative figure who orchestrated a cold-blooded crime for financial control.
Any initial altruism, if it ever really existed, was just completely consumed by her search for wealth and adoration. She turned her family less into a loving home and more into a criminal organization.
And what stands out, what really defines the tragedy here, is the systemic abuse the children endured. Not just by Anderson, but by Flordelis herself. They were forced into a system where their mother was an untouchable idol and their father an abusive controller.
They were victims long before the murder, and then they were weaponized, used as tools to carry out the crime, making them the ultimate victims of her towering, destructive ambition.
If you want to view the real visual evidence, including police footage, detailed maps of the crime scene, and family photos from this deeply disturbing case, be sure to subscribe to the xCrimes YouTube channel.
Follow us and join us again next time.